Right now, you think you are reading this because you decided to watch this video. You decided to click. You decided to stay. But what if every single one of those decisions was already written before you made them? Not by fate, not by God, not by some outside force, but by the exact physical state of your brain in the milliseconds before you felt like you chose anything at all. That question sounds like philosophy. It is actually neuroscience. And the answer might change how you see every choice you have ever made. In 1983, a neurophysiologist named Benjamin Libet ran an experiment that should have been boring. He asked volunteers to sit in a chair, watch a spinning clock hand, and flex their wrist whenever they felt like it. Simple. They could move at any moment they wanted. Total freedom. The only rule was, remember where the clock hand was the moment you decided to move. What Libet found shattered something most people never recover from. The brain showed electrical activity preparing for the movement, what scientists call the readiness potential, a full 550 milliseconds before the person moved. That was expected. Brains need time to fire muscles. Here is what was not expected. The person did not consciously decide to move until 200 milliseconds before the motion. The brain had already started building the action 350 milliseconds before they were even aware of choosing it. The decision happened. Then, afterward, you became aware of it and called it a choice. Think about what that means. The you that feels like it is in charge, the one reading these words, nodding, forming opinions, that version of you arrived late to a party your brain already started. Libet himself spent the rest of his career wrestling with this. He tried to offer a workaround. Maybe consciousness does not initiate the choice, he said, but it can veto it. A free won't rather than a free will. But even that idea has been challenged. Later studies using fMRI scanning, including landmark work by John-Dylan Haynes at the Bernstein Center in Berlin in 2008, pushed the timeline back even further. Haynes could predict which hand a person was going to move up to 10 full seconds before they felt they had made up their mind. 10 seconds. Your brain had already decided. You just had not heard the news yet. But this is where most people stop, panic slightly, and then go back to their lives unchanged. Because it feels like nothing changed. You still feel like you are choosing your breakfast. You still feel like you picked this video intentionally. The experience of choice is so vivid, so immediate, so undeniable that the data seems almost impossible to take seriously. And that feeling, that overwhelming sense of authorship over your own actions, has a name and an explanation. Psychologist Daniel Wegner called it the illusion of conscious will, not a flaw, not a glitch, a feature. Your brain is constantly constructing a story in which you are the protagonist making decisions. It stitches together intention and action and presents you with a seamless narrative. You wanted this, so you did it. The story feels true because you are inside it. But the story is assembled after the fact, the same way a historian writes about events that have already occurred. This is not metaphor. This is mechanism. Your brain generates a prediction of what you are about to do, compares it to what your body then does, and when they match, which they almost always do, it tags the action as yours, chosen, willed. The sensation of agency is the tag, not the cause. So, where does that leave you? Here is the part most neuroscientists do not like to say in interviews, but the data points toward it clearly. What you call a choice is a product. It is the output of prior causes, your genetics, your upbringing, the last thing you ate, the temperature of the room, the mood you were in when you woke up, 1,000 earlier experiences compressing down through your neural architecture into a single moment that you label a decision. You did not choose your genes. You did not choose the family that shaped your earliest neural pathways. You did not choose the culture that handed you your values before you had the language to question them. And yet all of those forces are present inside every so-called choice you make, firing along with every neuron. The philosopher Sam Harris, who wrote at length on this topic, puts it starkly. You can do what you decide to do, but you cannot decide what you decide to do. Read that again. You can act on your choices, but the choices themselves arise from conditions you did not set. The thought appears in consciousness. You did not think it into being. It arrived. Then you owned it. This is deeply uncomfortable. and that discomfort is itself worth examining. Research by Kathleen Vose and Jonathan Schooler, published in 2008 in Psychological Science, found something troubling. When people were exposed to arguments against free will, when they were made to believe their choices were not really choices, they cheated more on tests. They were more aggressive toward others. They helped strangers less. Disbelief in free will, at least in that experimental form, made people behave worse. Why? Because the narrative of free will does something important. It holds people accountable. It gives actions moral weight. It makes the future feel like something you can influence. Strip that away and something in the motivation system loosens. So humanity has built its entire civilization on a story that may not be literally true. And that story might be necessary. Courts punish people. Schools reward students. Parents praise and correct children. All of this rests on the assumption that people could have chosen differently, that they had options, that the action came from the self, and the self is responsible. But here is the counterintuitive twist. Knowing all of this does not have to destroy anything, because even if your choices are caused by prior conditions, even if your brain starts a decision before you feel it, something still matters enormously. The conditions themselves can change. The brain is not static. Every experience you have, every idea you encounter, every habit you build or break, every relationship, every book, all of it becomes the prior cause that shapes the next decision. You cannot step outside the chain, but you are inside it, and being inside it means you are part of what shapes what comes next. Neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky, in his 2023 book Determined, argues this more rigorously than anyone before him. There is no free will in the classical sense, he says. But behavior is still changeable. Environments change behavior. Therapy changes behavior. Understanding changes behavior. The fact that everything is caused does not mean everything is fixed. The river has no choice but to follow the landscape. But if you change the landscape, the river runs differently. And here is what that means for you, right now, today. That habit you keep meaning to break. That decision you keep putting off. That version of yourself you keep promising you will become. You may not be freely choosing any of it in the way you imagined. But the conditions around you, the people you spend time with, the information you let in, the small actions you repeat, those are real inputs into a real system that produces real outputs called your choices. You are not a ghost inside a machine. You are the machine. And machines can be rebuilt. The moment you feel like you are choosing, even if that feeling arrives a fraction of a second late, even if the decision was already forming in your neurons before your awareness caught up, that moment is still yours. The experience of deliberation is real. The weight of it is real. The consequences are real. What changes is not the importance of your choices. What changes is the arrogance with which you hold them. Because if your beliefs were shaped by causes you did not choose, so were everyone else's. The person who made a choice you despise, they too arrived at that choice through a chain of causes they did not set in motion. That does not make the choice harmless. It does not erase consequences. But it does change the quality of your judgment. Less contempt, more curiosity, less certainty about who deserves what, more interest in what conditions produce what people. This is what the science of free will ultimately offers. Not paralysis, not nihilism, not an excuse for anything, just a quieter, more honest relationship with the mind you are living inside. Right now, you think you are reading this because you chose to. Maybe you did. Maybe the choosing started long before you got here. Maybe both things are true at once, and that is the only kind of freedom you ever had or ever needed.